Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be going over neuroanatomy. So in this video, this is only going to be a review for you guys. If you're a PMHNP student trying to pass for the board, this should be a review. And in this video, I will cover cerebrum, which is made up of, we know, frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobe. And we also know that now cerebrum also includes the cerebral cortex. It includes the limbic system. It includes thalamus, hypothalamus, and basal ganglia. I will also cover brainstem. So wait, pause. If you are new to this channel, just like me, I'm new to this channel. I actually got 623 subscribers. I'm really shocked by it. Thank you for following. I do want to encourage the new people who haven't subscribed to subscribe to this channel because I do try to put out weekly videos for the PMHNP board certification to help you guys pass that board. And if you enjoyed watching it, go ahead and like that button, share it, and don't forget to comment. Give me your thoughts. Tell me what you're thinking. What was helpful? What didn't help? Am I talking too fast? Some of the videos I know I've edited, I did clip out the pauses and I didn't realize that it made it seem like it's extra fast. I'm talking really fast, so I'm sorry about that. In the newer videos, I will try to talk much slower and to give you guys a little bit spacing between the video clips. So guys, let's dive in and let's get to it. Neuroanatomy and the brain. We know the brain tissue is categorized as either white matter or gray matter. Now, white matter is the myelinated axons of neurons. The gray matter is composed of nerve cell bodies and dendrites. This is the working area of the brain and it contains the synapses. And this is the area of neuronal connection. Now let's take a look at what consists the outermost surface of the brain. Now this is structured to contain grooves and dips of corrugated wrinkles within the brain tissue that provides anatomical landmarks or reference points. The functions is to increase brain surface area. It increases working area and cell communication area. On the brain, we can see there are grooves and dips, and they are named by size and depth. Sulci are small, shallow grooves. Fissures are deeper grooves extending into the brain. And gyri are the raised tissue areas. We know the brain does have distinct anatomical areas, and the brain is subdivided into the cerebrum and the brainstem. Here's an image of what the gyrus or the gyri looks like, along with sulcus or sulci looks like. So here we go. The largest part of the brain is divided in two. So we have the right hemisphere and we have the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is dominant in people and it controls the right side of the body. Now, the right hemisphere controls most of left-sided body functions. So we need normal functioning and it requires effective coordination of both of these hemispheres together. So take a look at this clip right here and ask yourself what part of the brain this is. Can you guess what part of the brain this is called? So we know normal functioning requires effective coordination of two hemispheres, right? The left and the right. And both of these hemispheres are connected by, if you guessed it right, it's connected by the corpus callosum. So guys, this is the corpus callosum that you see in this clip. And corpus callosum is an area of sensory motor information exchange between the two hemispheres. If you enjoy watching my videos and would love to show some love and support, follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, and you can also follow me on my Facebook page, PMHNP 101. And if you feel like you need help one-on-one or need some advice, go ahead and shoot me an email. I'll try to respond as soon as possible. So here I have the left hemisphere, and This hemisphere, you can see the frontal lobe outlined, the parietal lobe, the temporal, and the occipital lobe outlined. And we know each hemisphere is divided into these four major lobes, which work in an interactive and integrated manner. And in each of these lobes have distinct functioning. So let's start with frontal lobe and let's talk about the functions of frontal lobe. So we know the frontal lobes are part of the cerebral cortex and are the largest of the brain structures. The frontal lobe contains a number of important substructures, including the prefrontal cortex and orbital frontal cortex, just to name a few. And these substructures are involved in attention and thought, it's involved in voluntary movement, it's involved in decision making, and language. There are many functions of the frontal lobe, but I do want to focus on just a few. And when I say frontal lobe, I want you to key in and focus on the words like attention and thought, voluntary movement. I want you to think of decision making and language. So those are the key words to think of frontal lobe. Frontal lobe, attention and thought, voluntary movement, decision making, and language. So functions of frontal lobe include motor functioning. Motor functioning we know is responsible for controlling voluntary motor activity. Another function of frontal lobe we can see is that it coordinates movement of multiple muscles. Now, coordination of multiple muscle movements, we can see this take place in the premotor area. So, premotor area coordinates movement of multiple muscles. Another function that I would want you guys to focus is on seat of executive functioning. This is very important to know. This area now helps with working memory, it helps with reasoning, it helps with planning, prioritizing, any judgment or impulse control. We can see this take place in seat of executive functioning. Another function of frontal lobe we can see is expressive speech. If this area is affected, we can definitely see some intellectual changes take place. And so we can see Broca's area be affected if there's a language barrier in expressive speech. And we can also notice that frontal lobe has some personality development functioning. So we can see if there's any changes or if there's any problem that is taking place in the frontal lobe, it can lead to personality changes. It can lead to emotional and intellectual changes. So here in this image, I have the temporal lobe highlighted, and you can see that there are many substructures in temporal lobe. You don't really need to know all these substructures. The structures that I would want you to focus in on as to know the difference would be the language, and that takes place in the Wernicke's area, as you can see. Wernicke's area is functionally defined structure that is involved in language comprehension. So, in about 97% of human beings, major language function are contained in the left hemisphere of the brain. And for most people, Wernicke's area is lateralized to the left side. Another function of temporal lobe is it's primarily known for auditory area. It's primarily known for auditory area. It's also known for memory, emotion. It's also known for vision with sensory information. So you can see a person have facial recognition damaged over here if there is some sort of a problem, and temporal lobe, facial recognition, perception be poor, object recognition, maybe even memory acquisition, right? So understanding language would be a problem if their Wernicke's area was affected. Emotional reaction could have been a problem, take place in the temporal area. Um, Also know that when there is a damage to the temporal lobes, this can result in neurological deficits called agnosias, so which refers to the inability to recognize specific categories. So like body parts, you can't recognize body parts, you can't tell the difference between the colors, you can't tell the difference between the faces of people, you can't differentiate music or smells. So if there is a damage to the temporal lobe, you'll see problems such as visual or auditory hallucinations. You would see aphasia and amnesia in patients. Guys, here I have a picture of the occipital lobe, as you can see, and we know the primary visual area of the brain is the occipital lobe, right? So this part of the brain helps neurons to encode different visual information such as color, orientation, and motion. And we can see as part of the occipital lobe, the functions of it is, like I said, it's primarily visual. Integration area, it integrates vision with other sensory information. And anytime if there is a damage to the occipital lobe, this can lead to visual field defects, it can lead to blindness, and even visual hallucinations. Okay, so let's talk about parietal lobe. Here I have an image of the parietal lobe, and we know parietal lobe plays an important role in integrating information from different senses to build a coherent picture of the world. Let's take a look at parietal lobe functions. Now, the functions of parietal lobe is primary sensory area. It functions for taste, it functions for reading and writing. So, anytime there is a problem or damage going on with the parietal lobe, this is going to lead to sensory perceptual disturbances and agnosia. Now, let me ask you this. What does agnosia mean? Agnosia is the loss of ability to identify objects or people. Cerebrum. Cerebrum, we know, includes the cerebral cortex, the limbic system, thalamus, hypothalamus, and basal ganglia. So the cerebral cortex, we know it controls wide array of behaviors. It controls the contralateral side of the body. So the opposite side of the body. The right side hemisphere controls the left side of the body, and the left side hemisphere controls the right side of the body. The cerebral cortex also has a sensory information that is relayed from the thalamus and then it's processed and integrated in the cortex. It's responsible for much of the behavior that makes us human. So think about your speech, think about cognition, think about judgment, perception, and motor function. The limbic system here is a group of brain structures, including the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and thalamus, that are involved in processing and regulating emotions, memory, and sexual arousal. So, the limbic system is an important element of the body's response to stress and is highly connected to the endocrine and the autonomic nervous system. The limbic system is also responsible for processing the body's response to orders. If the limbic system is damaged, the problems that you would see in a person would be affecting their emotions, behaviors, risk taking, and decision making. And don't forget, it would also affect their memory as well. So, what is the function of amygdala? Amygdala is responsible for mediating mood, fear, emotion, and aggression. It's also responsible for connecting sensory smell information with emotions. What about hippocampus? What does it do? Hippocampus regulates memory and converts short term memory into long term memory. What about hypothalamus? Hypothalamus plays key roles in various regulatory functions, such as appetite, sensations of hunger and thirst, water balance, circadian rhythms, body temperature, libido, and hormonal regulation. And now for thalamus. What does it do? Thalamus is a sensory relay station except for smell. It modulates the flow of sensory information to prevent overwhelming the cortex. It regulates emotions, memory, and related affective behaviors. Let's talk about basal ganglia. It's also known as corpus striatum. Corpus striatum. Here's a picture of what the basal ganglia looks like. It contains both the caudate and the putamen. So, basal ganglia serves as a complex feedback system to modulate and stabilize somatic motor activity. This is now the information that is conveyed from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. It also plays a role in movement initiation, so complex motor functions with association connections. Basal ganglia functions in learning and automatic actions. What do I mean by that? So these would be examples of walking or driving a car. We know that basal ganglia contains extrapyramidal motor system. It functions in involuntary motor activities. So these are going to be examples would be muscle tone, the posture, the coordination of muscle movement, or even your common reflexes. There are many psychotropic medications that can affect the extrapyramidal motor nerve tract, and it causes involuntary movement as the side effect. So, when we think of any problems that can occur in basal ganglia, this would be leading to bradykinesia, hyperkinesia, and dystonia. Think of EPS symptoms, guys. Take a look at this image. Here I have midbrain, pons, medulla. This is part of the brainstem, and the brainstem also has cerebellum and reticular formation. And here are a few pictures that I would like to share with you guys. This is another image of the midbrain, pons, and the medulla. Here is another image of the pons. And lastly, this is the cerebellum. Okay, so now let's talk about the brainstem. The brainstem is made up of cells that produce neurotransmitters. It includes, like I said previously, it includes the midbrain, pons, medulla, cerebellum, and reticular formation. So now, what does the midbrain do? Midbrain, when you think of midbrain, I want you to think of dopamine synthesis. The midbrain houses the ventral tegmental area and the substantia nigra. Pons houses the locus ceruleus. This is the area for norepinephrine synthesis. Medulla, as we know, together with the pons, contains autonomic control centers that regulate internal body functions. Cerebellum. Cerebellum is responsible for maintaining equilibrium. Now, this place acts as a gross movement control center. What do I mean by that? This is the place that controls movement, the balance, and posture of a person. So each hemisphere of cerebellum has an ipsilateral control. What does that mean? That means it's the same side of the body. Problems with the cerebellum, it can lead to ataxia. Ataxia is uncoordinated and inaccurate movements. Now, when there is a person that has problem with cerebellum, we would do a test called Romberg test. It's important for detecting deficiencies in cerebellum functioning. And now let's talk about reticular formation system. This is known as the primitive brain. It receives input from the cortex, an integration area for input from post-sensory pathways. It innervates thalamus, hypothalamus, and the cortex. So the reticular formation's function would include involuntary movement, reflex, muscle tone, and vital sign control. So when you think of vital sign control, think of blood pressure and think of respiratory rate. Now, this part of the brain is critical to consciousness. It helps us to mentally focus, to be alert, and to pay attention to environmental stimuli. So, before I get into functional assessment and cover this topic real quick, I do want to briefly welcome all the first time users. If it is your first time being on my channel, can you do me a favor? Just comment below and say hello. Guys, I know there's a lot to know for this exam, and I will tell you that you just need to narrow down your resources. So, the Purple Book, I highly recommend you study from the Purple Book. There are 100 questions at the end of the Purple Book. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Purple Book, I have attached an Amazon link under the description below, so you can go ahead and click that. And for those of you who already have the book, I know you've been studying tremendously, so all this video is just a review and to help you and make you feel comfortable knowing the material. So with that said, let me talk about functional assessment. This is very important. The reason I want to go over functional assessment is because of the keyword executive functioning. I know there are some people that don't know the difference between activities of daily living versus instrumental activities of daily living, as well as what is considered executive functioning. So let's look at the components of functional assessment. Functional assessment, there are three components: activities of daily living, which are basic self care skills such as bathing, dressing, eating, and toileting. So you might do this assessment for an elderly patient who has dementia or Alzheimer's. You can also do instrumental activities of daily living, which are complex activities needed for independent functioning, right? So this is assessing if they're able to shop, if they're able to cook, if they're able to drive, and maybe some housekeeping. Are they able to do housekeeping? Thirdly, I do want to talk about executive functioning, and this is part of judgment and planning. So, if you think about a dementia patient or Alzheimer's patient, what part of the brain is this affecting? This is affecting the frontal lobe, and you think about what is considered executive functioning activity or assessment. What falls under the functional assessment would be the ability to maintain a calendar, to manage money, to have appointments and to keep them, and prioritize activities. So these are considered executive functioning. Here's what you need to do: just concentrate and keep reviewing. Binge on my videos if you have to. There's no shame to that, okay? And we're going to get through this. So, with that said, let's go get them, get them, get them.